the second and final question that I had for you guys was about Varys. What if Martin likes his twists, of course. So what if the big twist with the character of Varys is that the only agenda he really has is the good of the realm? What if he has very little? I mean, of course, he wants to be well fed and he wants to be plump and he wants to have his needs taken care of. But I mean, beyond that, what if his big concern is basically for the well-being of the small folk?
I mean, it's quite plausible. As I said earlier, I think that his tenure as Master of Whisperers to King Aerys throws a certain amount of suspicion on that. I think certainly in his own mind, he thinks that what he's doing is for the good of the realm. But that, I think there's also this legacy of his time in Pentos, where his scam was to steal things to people and sell them back to them.
Yeah.
And I think my guess about his grand conspiracy is that his trick was to steal the Targaryen dynasty and then sell it back to Westeros.
Interesting.
And for all the right reasons. I mean, I don't think he would have invested as much care as he has in the raising of Aegon VI if he didn't want a Targaryen dynasty that worked, that was functional. But I think there is a certain amount of selfishness there.
Yeah, or he's a heavy utilitarian or something.
This is a guy who, in his own way, has plunged Westeros into civil war repeatedly in the hopes of creating a better, system in the end. I mean, there's his contributions to the Robert's Rebellion. There's his contributions to the War of the Five Kings. There's his plan for invasion. And then his most recent efforts where he's now, just as, some limited peace was beginning to emerge.
Yeah.
He's completely destabilized the government. There's going to be blood on the streets.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much we can trust the account of his time as Master of Whisperers, because that's a key point in throwing this in the previous question. And so we know from Barristan that he caused trouble there. Who do we know this from?
Stannis.
Stannis as well. Oh, it was Stannis that said to the Rod. Stannis, it's like hearsay. We heard from Stannis, who heard from Barristan, I think.
Well, I mean, it's problematic because we don't know really what was going on during Aerys II's, reign. And by the way, if they ever get through the books and want to keep doing the TV show, like a good, Battlestar Galactica-esque spinoff would be like a one-season, Robert's Rebellion. I think that would be really cool.
Yeah.
So that'd be a cross between Caprica and Muppet Babies?
Yeah, kind of.
I liked Caprica quite a bit, actually.
Yeah, me too.
Continuity was all messed up, though.
One final point on Varys is like, and I agree with you, he may very well in his head believe that he's doing the right thing, because a lot of people believe that, even a lot of the worst people in history believe that, right? That they're doing it for the ultimate good or for the right thing.
Yeah, of course. But I just thought it might be kind of a neat little twist if Martin wanted to keep going down this whole road of twists. Is, okay, the guy that you think is the most vile, well, maybe besides Littlefinger, actually is the most decent of them all.
I don't know if I'd call Varys the most vile.
Yeah,
I mean, of the conspirators, he's one of the few, he's willing to try and save people's lives even when he doesn't have to. Yeah. He tried to save Eddard, he saved Gendry. He had no reason to do that. Whereas, to Littlefinger, I think on a certain level enjoys hurting people, in a secret way. I think he likes it when shit goes crazy.
I think Varys's end goals could be more noble. He just has really brutal methods, like even just having the little birds, right? That's a very brutal system of cutting out tongues and doing all that. That's a very brutal means.
That's very true.
And it's a weird recapitulation of his own mutilation, which I find it's an interesting sub-theme of the series, is that a lot of people seem to be kind of replicating the damage that was done to them. I mean, you look at how Cersei deals with any young woman around her, and it's completely obvious how much she's kind of channeling her own kind of trauma into them.
That's fascinating. My one last thought about the whole Dark Lord the Sith conspiracies is I personally, I think, would like to see the end resolution of the story be there's no Iron Throne anymore. And I think, I kind of secretly think that George Martin's whole story is anti-invasion and, well, of course, obviously anti-war, but anti-conquest, anti-Targaryen, anti-everything. Just the American ideal of self-realization, right? Self-development. So I think it'd be kind of neat if that's ultimately what Varys is trying to do, whether Illyrio knows that or not.
Well, I don't think that's what Varys is about. I think Varys very much believes in kind of the one realm theory. I think my own suspicion is that, there's this idea at the end of all of this of some kind of renewal and compromise that, getting the rulers of the land to start thinking in terms other than total victory or total defeat. Because to me, the danger of like Daenerys at this point is that she could be a new Aegon the Conqueror, and nothing would change. It would just restart the cycle of conquest followed by an insufficiently organized government, followed by rebellions, followed by civil war, followed by a new invasion, and that would just be far too depressing.
Yeah. So you're saying like a sort of Great Council or even Magna Carta type event?
I mean, given my own, political and historical sympathies, I think some version of a Magna Carta, please stop burning us with dragons, would be great, because, and, hopefully that's what Daenerys has kind of learned in Meereen.
Yeah. Learning from that, what's over there. Yeah.
I mean, because that was one fail. I mean, it's tricky because what Meereen represents is a failed attempt at reconstruction in the American historical, sense of the term.
Yeah.
That she couldn't decide between leniency and harshness. And in my most recent piece on Tower of the Hand, I quote this famous bit from Machiavelli where he basically says, if you're going to take over, do all of your killing at once. Don't prolong the agony. And, maybe that's the message in Meereen, but, I kind of hope that that's not the only message that she takes away.
Yeah. But, Mark, as you said, like, the series ending with no Iron Throne, well, that's kind of, at least the way I look at the series near the start of it was the Seven Kingdoms have always been seven kingdoms for hundreds and thousands of years. They've only been tied together for a couple hundred years, and most of that was through the strength of dragons. The dragons died, and the kingdoms were just kind of like on autopilot, or they were coasting, and they were waiting for something to shake them apart. The Robert's Rebellion happens, and it gets shaken apart. If Ned and Robert had been different people, if they hadn't been as close as they were, or Ned had an ambition of power, there could have been a longer civil war, and the kingdom could have broken up then. And this War of the Five Kings was only a delay. This thing was there. So there's still regional differences. There's still things there. So instead of like going through a unifying thing, it could end up the other way. They could break apart again. Not necessarily a good thing, because when you have seven kingdoms, there's more likely for conflict than when you have one kingdom, right? So
yeah,
you have. Oh, I'm sorry, Stephen. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, the big question mark here, and this is where I think a lot of our theories kind of hit a brick road, is the kind of the more typical high fantasy stuff that's going on with the others is kind of a huge question mark hanging over the political story, which is, nothing unifies a country like existential threats from outside.
Yeah.
And, if because that was what, built the Night's Watch in the beginning. That was what built the idea that there is a realm that has to be protected. That idea has been lost over 8,000 years. And perhaps this is a moment of renewal where people are reminded that, there's more to Westeros than who gets their ass on the Iron Throne.
Maybe that's why the others are taking so long to get south. They're going to let everybody else fight it out first. And
yeah, that's kind of like my number one thing about the next book is there better be some damn others showing up.
Oh, I think so.
You know what? I think what's kind of cool is that your icon to me is showing up as a question mark, your image. So we talk about these questions, and you're talking as a giant question mark.
I am the question mark.
No, Stevens, I mean.
Yeah. Oh,
damn. Oh, really? Yeah. Mine is supposed to be the angry face of Gilgamesh Wolfenbach.
Yeah.
Oh, I see it.
Yeah, I don't have you added on here. I think that's why. Just it's funny because this giant question mark's like, yeah, we're talking about these important questions.
the one thing I would say to your encapsulation of Westerosi history, I mean, is well, actually, I'll ask you a question. You have read all the Duncan Egg novellas, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Do you remember the introduction that Martin writes, the kind of like the historical backdrop to those novellas?
I don't think I have.
He talks about how when all the different civilizations landed on Westeros, there weren't 7 kingdoms. There were several dozen. A couple hundred, actually.
Well, there were way even more than 7. Yeah, there was tons of them.
So whittling down to 7 was a very slow and torturous process. I don't know how long the 7 kingdoms were the 7 kingdoms, but I always kind of got the impression after reading that it wasn't very long at all.
They were definitely longer than Targaryens, though. And in fact, the 7 kingdoms, often they fall under geographical type of lines, because that favors, like Dorne and the Reach, they have those mountains and that sort of thing that favors that formation of kingdoms, like Europe did. So
yeah, I think there was a bit of a back and forth, but certain agglomerations make geopolitical sense. Like you mentioned the mountains there. That makes sense. The Vale, that's a clearly defined entity. The North, has, honestly quite astonishing political continuity. Although, one of the things you'll notice is the whole thing about, when you learn about these Stark kings, a lot of the time it's the story of, well, this Stark king died, in battle. This Stark king was skinned by a Bolton. As much there's always been a king in the North, it probably was a sort of a thing where, for periods there was a strong king in the North. And, the North really meant the North. And in other times, they were, first among equals, or not even that. One of the useful things about the Duncan Egg stories is in the Sworn Sword, the way that Sir Eustace Osgrey talks about the conflicts between the king and